Michail Antonio has been speaking about loyalty and the lack of it from clubs these days, bemoaning the situations of Isak and himself to a degree. I'm going to go through those comments and talk about why I think he's completely misguided and where I think he's right. Because ultimately, I'm a bit disappointed by Antonio's comments. And to one degree, I understand it, but we're going to get straight into what he told 442.com. Let's just start off right here. He said people are going to love it or hate it, or what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it either way. As a player, loyalty in the game has really gone. Obviously, I was at West Ham for 10 years. Like all these players, that doesn't really last anymore. And I feel rightly so, because at the end of the day, clubs no longer treat players like they used to either. So because of that reason, why should a player be loyal to the club? I understand being loyal to fans, but being loyal to a club when he's going to try and better himself and better his life and try and achieve things that he's not going to achieve at another club. So it is what it is for me. I feel like what he's done is trying to better himself and what he can do to better himself. I'll go on to the next bits, which is even more inflammatory. But that part about, separating, not being loyal to the club, but being loyal to the fans. Unfortunately, you can't be loyal to one and not the other. What Isak is doing, I'm going to make a separate video on it and why we should all be worried about his situation. But what Isak is doing, there's no way for him to do it in a way where he's loyal to the fans and not the club. That's just impossible, because unfortunately, if you spite the club, you spite the fans, because you damage the club, and we all support the club and the team and want them to get better, and it's only going to have a negative impact for Newcastle. So there's no other way to go about it, Antonio went on to say, we are meat to them. As soon as we start going sell, it's stale. It's time to sell or throw away. Before, if a player was at a club for a few years, you see the human side of that player. Now it's all about money and how much money they can make for the club. And that's where it's got to. So if a club is going to think about the money side of things, why shouldn't a player? Of course, if a player is not performing, you're going to look to upgrade, aren't you? And see if you can get a sale and move that player on. And, at the end of the day, I think in a situation of most jobs in life, if we're not performing, we get moved on, we get let go. We don't even get traded to another company. You're just gone, mate, and you have to go out there and find your own way. I mean, Antonio obviously hasn't been given a new deal, but he was offered a deal that he didn't accept, which is ultimately down to him. And look, I hate being in a position to defend the club, meaning the regime, but he had that car accident, which was nothing to do with the club, no fault of the club. He wasn't playing for us when he hurt himself, and I believe he was massively supported. To see the fans, the outpouring from the fans, the club supported him. And then he was offered a new deal completely out of sympathy and loyalty and sentiment. There was no way, if he didn't get injured, if he didn't get hurt in that car crash, he would have been offered a new deal. It just wasn't happening. He was really on the downturn of his career. And 10 years, it was a great career, but he's 35 now. We can't just keep a player forever. I understand loyalty, but at the same time, a club's first loyalty should be to their fans and putting out the best possible team for their fans. And paying Antonio 100 grand a week at 35 years old after he's missed all that football would not be showing loyalty to the fans, would not be in the best interest of the fans. It's even the best possible team. But they tried to come to an arrangement, tried to give him a contract where he could, go out on a high with the club, say goodbye to the fans, and he turned it down. That's his choice. That's completely fine. But the club continued to let him train at the training ground even though he was out of contract. They still let him train. They still was offering him contracts. They've welcomed him back at the club to do a farewell video. What more does he want? Did he want a new contract at his current wages that we was paying him last season? Is that what he wanted? Was that what he felt by loyalty? I just want to know. And the thing is with Isak, look, I understand, like, you have a short career. You want to make the most of it. You want to win things, right? But there's a way of doing it without damaging the club. And Antonio sits there and talks about, oh, loyalty, and clubs used to be loyal to players. We've had situations where players have not been loyal to clubs for years and years and years. Paul Ince, Jermaine Defoe, Sol Campbell, Dimitri Payet, who stitched us up big time. Declan Rice, you can debate whether he would, but ultimately he wanted to leave, and we had to tell him he wasn't going to sign a new deal. We've had so many of those instances. You could go throughout league. Van Persie wanting to leave Arsenal to go to Man United, who the two teams hated each other. Nasri, Ashley Cole. Like, we could go to so many examples of players not being loyal to clubs, and you could probably go to examples vice versa. Everyone's going to do what is in their own best interest. A club should always do what's in the best interest of the team as a whole, not the individual. A player, again, they have to think about their career, but there's a right and wrong way of doing things. Not turning up to training, saying you're never going to play for the club again. That's not the right way to do things. That's not the right way to leave a club. He should have put a release clause in his contract. He should have not signed such a lengthy contract. Maybe he didn't believe he was going to be this good, but he became this good at Newcastle. And listen, he's earned the right to a big contract. All that, he's been excellent. But to say the club aren't being loyal to him by just rolling over and sending him to Liverpool for a fair price is crazy. It's crazy. I do think Newcastle should sell. But to say, like, well, players should just do what they want now. We'll just have chaos in the Premier League. I just think it's misguided. I understand Antonio as a player and he's sympathising with other players. But just as your legacy is the things that you win, the achievements on the pitch, your legacy is also the reputation you leave behind on how you conduct yourself as a footballer. And Isak could have had a very good legacy at Newcastle and still moved on to another club, but his legacy is tarnished there. Maybe he doesn't care. But it's, again, like I said, not something I can agree with in how you conduct yourself. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit tone deaf and misguided for Antonio. Football players are paid a hell of a lot of money. A hell of a lot of money. They are millionaires now. Antonio is a millionaire. He never has to work another day in his life. I don't know how he's spent his money and what he's saved, but with what he's earned, he's cushy, and he is set up for a very nice media career. And he talks about loyalty. I'm sure he'd have an opportunity to come back in another capacity at the club. We've got Colton Cole here. We've got Marlon Harewood. We've got ex-players that are part of this club, Paul Konchesky. So it's just what it is. A manager comes in, and the manager doesn't fancy a player and he wants to move him on. Well, that's just what the manager wants, and we have to back the manager. So it's unfortunate. It'd be nice to have Antonio to the point where he could stay and keep being part of the squad. I wanted him to stay if the contract was right. I've got a lot of love for Antonio over the years, but he's wrong in this regard. Players are pampered and catered to like never before. They don't pay their dues anymore like they used to, washing the first team's boots and all of that. And no, like from their little kids, teams fall over them. They buy them houses. They treat them like kings, all to get them into the club. And then they're paid now a lot of money from early on. you would think for all of that money that they're given, a little bit of loyalty could be expected. Not sacrifice your whole career, but just to try and do things in the right way. Antonio, I think, has been treated very well at the club. The biggest issue at loyalty at West Ham is the loyalty from the ownership to the fans.